So we continue with great tunes. As we've said before, and then what we do every day is we talk to amazing people. And so we continue our conversation with great people. And something that's really fascinating about this conversation, I have never, ever thought of data-driven districts. Now, New Leaders Foundation, they're all about the transformative power of data in South African education. Now, I understand data sets. I know what the job is, how it works in corporate, but I've never thought of data being able to have some transformative agenda within the South African education space. Now, NLF has been instrumental in helping education officials make informed, time-sensitive decisions that improve learner outcomes with access to insights from over 12 million learners across 24,000 schools. The DDD, which is the Data-Driven Districts Dashboard, has reshaped how educators approach challenges like learner attendance, subject performance, and grade pass rates. Joining me now to talk about it, and he does a lot of things, but we're specifically talking about New Leaders Foundation, is Shane Perrier, who's a business development expert. Shane, good morning and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, welcome.
I love this idea of using data. We understand the stories related to education. We've seen, for example, we talk about the dropout rates, for example. We talk about teenage pregnancy. At some point, the Department of Basic Education brought in the E-Cubed program to talk about entrepreneurial thinking. We understand Teacher Connect, the app that allows teachers to think outside the box, give them teacher tools, but data to inform decision-making in real time. That's exciting stuff, man.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for having me here. Absolutely, it's really important stuff, and I think it goes with the old saying, "What can't be measured can't be managed."
I think, love that,
and that really is the driving principle. So we use data, and remember, we're not tapping into new data. This is not we're creating new data engines, etc. This is data that is being collected by the Department of Basic Education. So we're just looking at that data, putting in various filters, using AI, using the most recent technologies to actually understand that data, get insights out of the data, and then actually action and put implementation or interventions within the school's environment so that you get the maximum impact for where the schools need to improve to become best in class schools, best practice schools.
You're the expert, so you would know this better than I would. Data shows patterns. And can you then apply that to schools? There are patterns of behavior, patterns of performance, and can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can show a trend of how schools are performing. Just for example, this morning we were presenting to a large mining house, and we talked about how there's a high rate of overage learners in our school's environment.
A high rate of?
Overage learners.
Oh, yeah. I had a guy in my class that I sure already had 3 children.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we're laughing about it, but actually...
But it's a serious issue.
It's a serious issue in schools in this country. And which means that, the national average could be 20%, for example. But if a particular school is sitting with 35% overage learners, then that's a problem. And again, overage could mean 1 year overage, it could be 5 years overage, it could be 10 years overage. And there could be multiple reasons. It's not necessary that the student is not passing or they started late there's various reasons. But the data will tell you what are those reasons of why you have a high overage learner population, for example. And then you drill down and drill down till you actually find the symptoms. Another example is we saw that across more than a big majority of our schools, the highest absenteeism of students was on Monday. We figured out that it was on Monday because they were being abused on the weekend by parents that were alcoholic. And so the kids didn't want to come to school on Monday because they had bruises on their eyes or whatever.
Oh, wow.
So the data showed us that. Whereas teachers never knew why they didn't come on Sunday. Yes, I mean, they would know, but it was not a statistic that they could act on. But it was an interesting...
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And so then you have this data, right? So that's fascinating to me, is that kids on a Monday wouldn't come to school because they were abused over the weekend. The data flags potential items. You then, as a team, need to go into that data. Was it obvious that the absenteeism on a Monday is related to abuse, or you see that there's a number, quite a high number on a Monday, and so now it gives you a marker to say, investigate me.
Correct.
Look at me.
Correct.
And so then you start going down those rabbit holes.
Correct. So it could be the reason that they were being abused. The other reason could be that they didn't finish their assignment over the weekend, so they didn't want to come and show.
And deal with that issue.
Or it could be that money was over and they didn't have transport money to come to school. Or it could be multiple reasons. But we figured that abuse was the biggest reason why they didn't come on Monday. So you then classify into various reasons, and you say,
And then
okay,
you
how
can
do we
build an
tackle it?
intervention.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then you build an intervention to say, how do you problem solve for that? Because if you don't know that's the reason, or that's the biggest reason, then you're solving for the wrong symptoms.
Yeah. At which point, and it's just because you're talking now, I'm going, I mean, somebody must have thought, let's start looking at the data, because is this new, or have we been looking at data for years?
So we've been looking at data for years. It's about 12 years.
Okay.
So we basically are driven by a large funder, which is the Michael Suzman-Dell Foundation.
Yeah.
And again, we want more and more partners to come on board to understand and appreciate the work that we're doing. But really, it's been a 12-year-long journey. We now map 24,000 schools in the country out of 25,000 schools, which is considerably a large sample set. So we've scaled effectively in the last 12 years. But we want to deepen that impact, and we want to build the intervention. So interventions is at an early stage, but we've got skills development programs that have got educators across the fields, in schools, in circuits, districts, provinces, nationally, to get trained on how to look at this dashboard and data.
Yeah.
Because one thing is to produce these insights, but the other one is to actually...
People got to use it.
People got to use it. And the other thing is for people to actually put in the data at the school level so that we can analyze the data. So quality of data, consistency of data is also very important, because garbage in, garbage out. So it's important to also get these schools to actually feed in the data, which is through the administrators.
And start understanding why this is so important.
Absolutely.
Wow. You talked about the funding that you get from the Dell Foundation. Great organization, and I know that every year they award very limited organizations in South Africa get that funding. The New Leaders Foundation, the organization you work for, is 12 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for our audiences that don't know, tell us a little bit more about the organization.
So it's 12 years old. We have about 25 people in the company. It's a non-profit, so it's public benefit organization, which can give you Section 18A certificates if you fund them. They have a partnership with the DBE, so there's a special MOU, a memorandum of understanding, of working with the DBE, because remember, data is sensitive, and eventually the data is owned by the DBE. So we are just acting as a stakeholder on working on that data. So it's a very strong partnership. We run the data summit every year in partnership with the DBE, and we've got really a big chunk of the team is tech focus, because they're building the platform, the dashboards, the insights, the analysis on the data, visualizing the data, making sure that the teams on the ground, so we have local, provincial, district teams as well that are positioned all across the country that help and support these educators to feed in the information and data into the system, into SAMs, which is basically the DBE database, and we then sit on top of that SAM's database to pull in all the data, and then actually through a val extractor, and then actually get insights out of that data.
Yeah, I can only imagine that the data speaks very differently depending on which province area you're in. So something, for example, absenteeism on a Monday because of intoxicated parents abusing you might be not an issue in the Western Cape. It might be a different issue in the Western Cape. It might be, for example, anything, domestic abuse, whatever. In terms of the data sets, what is that entire range that you cover? So is that from bullying to absenteeism to dropout rates to teen pregnancy to violence at schools, interaction between teachers and students? What does it cover? Is it all of that?
Yeah, so good question. I think there's a large variety of data that's collected at a school level, at a learner level, and we are expanding that scope to cover all the data, but I think probably now we're at about 70% of data set that we capture. And it's important. For example, we want to go to the next step to talk about learner well-being and mental state and things like that. And that's more difficult, very popular-driven data, which is very, you can't just share it with people. So access to that data is also very critical. So we're putting in data policies. We've got all those policies and frameworks in place. But as we get more and more funding, the plan is to expand on that data set that we're collecting,
so
all 100%.
More
holistic, and also deepen the impact through interventions at the school level, through obviously district officials that actually are tasked to do this job. So remember, education professionals, whether it's at circuit, district, provincial levels, work with schools, principals, and with teachers to actually make sure these interventions happen on the ground. So we are just assisting them, giving them a view or lens to look at the data and saying, hey, look at these areas within the schools when you're going actually to manage these schools.
In many ways, you're the extra think tank that a school needs to be able to perform better.
Correct.
Now, here's a question I want to ask. You do a lot of engagement. I mean, you would know the answer to this. I can only imagine that you've seen an evolution of understanding in terms of the importance of data. But do you think we get it yet? Because if we really get what data can do and what the insights can do, I would assume, and I'm happy to be corrected by you, I would assume that eventually, if every school was data-driven, if every district official understood data, if, for example, you have collaborators at a school level, like Community Keepers sits in a school framework, and there are many others. If we became data-driven, we could improve our pass rates. We could have better outcomes at different levels leading up to matric. We could have better choices around career. We could have better interventions. Have you seen a better understanding of data, or are you guys still, as the organization, still having to do a lot of education around, guys, you guys don't understand the power of data?
Yeah, so I would say, Sam, that's mixed. I'm an engineer myself, so I love data, love to problem solve using data and evidence, because at the end of the day, schools have limited resources. Remember that. Their budgets are being cut. They have less budgets year on year. And typically quintile 1, 2, 3, 4 schools don't have the resources that, a rich school might have or a private school might have. So I must say there's an element of awareness and education, which has been the last 12 years we've been pushing that out. And I think we haven't covered all 24,000 schools in terms of awareness and skills development and actually training them on the use of the dashboard and how to feed information, but also use the data that's coming on your dashboard. So it's a combination of awareness, education, and skills development at the educator level across the provinces, and also it's an element of those that have actually understand the value of data to now say, okay, now that you understand it, let's bring it closer and put those interventions in place.
Let's make sure your decision making is based on hardcore facts and not feelings.
Yeah. So it's really driven by good leadership. If this leadership at the school, at the district level, and the district manager himself or herself wants to make their district the best district in the province, then you can actually see they pull you. And they say, okay, no, we want to make our district one of the best. So Kalakwenya as a district, they were 7th in the district in the province. And within a matter of 3 years, they became the first.
Just by understanding.
But just by understanding the value of that data and started building interventions to actually improve the district, the schools in the district. So they went from number 7 in the province to number 1.
It's quite interesting because you straddle both lines, right? So as you said, you're an engineer, you do the data, you do the tech. There's a lot of hard facts that you have to deal with. But then you deal with Citizen Leader Lab, which also brings in kind of, I think, the cream of the crop in terms of business, and it partners it with principals who are also want to understand it. It almost feels to me, and I don't know what the relationship is like between the two organizations themselves. I know you straddle both lines, but it almost feels that we now have to get in 2025 really understand the power of, and as Dr. Robin Whittaker, who's a former CEO, writes beautifully about trust-based partnerships. We now need to get better partnerships to say, well, you're doing it at the top, we're doing it at the bottom. How do we merge the data because all CEOs need data in order to be able to make informed choices around where their businesses are going. And then Citizen Leader Lab is now talking to principals about you can run your schools better if you understand the principles of running a good business. How do we get these partnerships to talk better to each other and say, well, you don't need the striker to be the defender, but the striker needs to recognize there has to be a defender. How do we get better partnerships?
Absolutely, and that means collaboration, right? I mean, I was at an ASCII event on Friday, and we talked about, which was held at EPSA, and it talked about how can different education NPOs come together to solve this common problem that we have in this country of poor education or statistics around that. And I think everybody agreed. And it's about how do we, and we're all tackling different elements of the pie, right, of the puzzle. Exactly. Somebody's doing leadership, somebody's doing data, somebody's doing
and they all fit
feeding
like a
schemes,
puzzle together.
and they all need to fit together. So I think there has to be, and there is some level of collaboration. I must say that there are companies, for example, maths and literacy is collaborating with numeracy, is collaborating with teacher development, is collaborating with technology and robotics and leadership and data. So there's all these elements, and I think all must come together at the DBE, where then they consolidate and say, okay, this is almost like a plug and play model, and say if I have a school and I need a leadership problem to be solved, I bring in Citizen Leader Lab. If I have a data issue, I bring in NLF. If I have a numeracy program, I bring Funda Wanda.
If I've got a psychosocial, I bring Community Keepers.
Absolutely. So I think we would love to see more collaboration in the industry, and I think there are some really good examples and case studies of it happening in the education space, but not enough. I would love to see more, and I think funders who have the purse strings and the money to dictate that should be able to run these collaborative partnerships, because they also sometimes are found negligent of running programs in silos, and that also then divides the process and negates the kind of impact in a particular school. So I think more collaboration will only do more good to schools.
We've got a very powerful community of just over 200,000 that listen to our station. The disposable income is over 8.5 billion rand, monthly disposable income. People that can move mountains if they really wanted to. How can they get hold of NLF? I think that data is so important, and I love the way you as the expert explaining to us as a layman that with data we can really make fundamental shifts in where our kids go. We have to really use data to change the lives of young South Africans, because there's no point in turning out South Africans that, and I know you know the stat, we've got the reading equivalency, most grade 4s are illiterate.
Yeah.
And so we need the data to be able to affect those areas of change. And just like we need proper ECD centers that are vetted, because we now know foundational phase learning and building is important. So yeah, where can people get hold of you?
So they can obviously go to the website, New Leaders Foundation, nlf.co.za. They can reach out to their schools. They can push for NLF being more on the horizon for educators in schools. They can, we don't have a crowdfunding initiative yet. We do work with large partners and funders. Like I said, we already engaged and have an MOU with government, but actually, they can reach out to us. They can reach out to me, Shane Perrier, and Shane at newleaders.co.za. And happy to connect with them and see how we can help them.
Perfect. So the organization is called New Leaders Foundation. That's Shane Perrier. All you've got to do is find out more about the organization. Go to the website. It's all about building data-driven districts. When we come back, we'll have news at the top of the hour.